Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's edition of the NeQter Town Halls, hosted by Patrick and myself. Um, I'm sure most of you have shown up to several of these, so we're going to do something a little new today. We'll be reviewing the next update we're going to be releasing. It's going to be 2.15.5. Patrick's going to walk you guys through an overview of all of the changes that you'll see and new additions and features. And then we'll open it up to a question and answer portion at the end of the webinar per usual. So feel free to fire off any questions throughout the webinar or at the end. We're more than happy to take pauses and explain things in more detail. Patrick, I will hand the webinar over to you, my friend.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. So like always, we're just going to be going over. I know we touched upon this last month, so in May. A lot of the things that we kind of hinted at have come to fruition. So I'll be able to show you. I have a test unit essentially of what 2.15.5 is going to look like, and just some of those enhancements. Essentially, one of the things, so the update was uh, soft target was actually yesterday, Monday, but we're doing some more testing, so it should be coming out either um, later this week or might be coming out sometime next week.
Hey,
So,
Pat,
mhm.
sorry to pause you, but can you turn your microphone volume up? People are having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Yeah, sure. Just give me 1 second. I thought I already adjusted this. So. You know what? I already adjusted it and it kicked it back down, so hopefully that's better. Um, so yeah. In terms of the new update, we're just going to. I reduced it down to one slide because don't want to be a broken record, but we still have about 50 people on proceeding. 215 4. Some on 215.3, but others are on 214. So just going to review kind of the bullet points of the update process, talk about the new agent update, and that's actually going to lead. We're going to be coming out with some more agent updates in future, so I'll touch upon that, and then we'll break down the 2.15.5 update, and then we'll do Q&A as Nick mentioned. Just going to quickly cover this. Everyone on here, I imagine, is on the latest and greatest, but just going to re-review for some of you who may not. Um, for the 2.15.3, and now, of course, 2.15.4 is the current, and 2.15.5 is going to be coming out. Um, just to rehash, the 214 to 215 jump takes a while. It's a lot of heavy lifting. It takes a few hours on average. It's important to not park on any of the updates, get up to the latest version, make sure that you have sound backups, and of course, do not power cycle during the update. And that goes for any updates, but typically the average update is 15 to 30 minutes. This one, of course, because it's a lot heavier, it's a few hours, so power cycling becomes more prevalent. So just wanted to quickly touch upon that. And uh, the one of the big things that the previous update came out with was an overhaul of user permissions. So the ability for read-only access on the compliance tool, read and write access to all other tools, and then of course admin getting access to everything, including settings. Previously, the compliance tool was limited to just an admin level user. That is, of course, no longer the case. One of the things that came up in enhancing the user management system was we added a separate access control or user permissions specifically on the compliance tool itself. So some users have got caught up in not having access to SSPs because you need to enable access in here and then enable additional access in the tool. So we might be looking to consolidate that in future to, you know, help any confusion that we might have caused with that new process. So one of the things over the past couple months as well, this is specifically really only for users that are dealing with Windows 11, is we have a new agent um, 215, the new 215 agent. So if you're on a previous version of our agent and you're on Windows 11 and you're having issues, we're aware of that, which is why we came out with this new version. So Windows 11 or the newer Windows Server as well, you're going to need to update. If you're on Windows 10 or previous versions, the uh, the agent is going to be just fine, the one that you currently have. So this is really only for Windows 11 users. So, getting that out of the way, we're able to cover some of the newer things that we have, and we've added some stuff. We're able to shoehorn some things into the update since we last talked at the beginning of May. So first and foremost, when it comes to 215.5, we reintroduced the health metrics dashboard. So previously on the previous version, we had to strip that out, but we reintroduced it. So you will be able to access the health dashboard. Um, Actually, let me just show you what that looks like. So with the health dashboard, and we actually added a couple other things to the main homepage, and I'll be reviewing those shortly. But basically, this kind of the metrics indicator of your own NeQter server, outlining usage and CPU and RAM. We added in the health dashboard so you can see a history of your utilizations or different um, capacities or different things that are happening, with your NeQter system. Additionally, and I touched upon this last month as well, is we did change what we were reading on the RAM side of things. Before we had been utilizing an allocated value, which had unfortunately been, and I do have that on my current demo system, outlining, it was up over 90% or getting into one of those higher values, and that's because that was an allocation metric. So you can see we're at 98%. We changed it to a used metric, actually changing to the underlying OS because before we had been leveraging Elastic's information on RAM use. So now it's going to better reflect what is actually in use, which is around 60-70%, not the 90+% that had been shown previously. And some users, profess concern, hey, why is this using so much? And technically it wasn't, so we wanted to change that to better reflect what was actually in use rather than reserved, because the different services in the tool like to reserve as much as they can so that they don't have any overages. So that was something that was enhanced. Additionally, we if we just go back down to where we were, we added a couple new charts to the homepage. A couple involve vulnerabilities as well as monitor status. So we did have monitored hosts before, but now we flanked it with the vulnerabilities as well as the the monitor status of if you have any health monitors, those are going to get tracked, and those will get listed out here on the home page. Nick, has there been any questions so far?
Yep, we do have a couple of questions. One from Mark Rogalski. He was wondering if you could confirm that Server 2022 requires the new NeQter client.
We had gotten this question before. I will have to double check with our devs. I believe so, just because 22 is, essentially paired with 11. So if there are any issues with between Windows 10 and 11 and the newer version of Server, I believe that you will have to update to the new 215 agent. Um, but we'll have to double confirm that.
Um, then
Mhm.
you had one other question, but it's a hardware-based question. Andrew Mullen was wondering if it's a possibility to adjust fan speeds on the NeQter server box because they are very reactive ever since he performed the update.
Okay.
I don't. I don't think
Yeah,
we
we
have
don't. Yeah, we do not have a UI way to go in, with the any of the settings with NeQter on the front end to go and adjust fan speed. But if there is if there's a hardware change that you're observing with the latest update, and it's being very different from how it was performing before. Um, if you could open up a ticket, or maybe you could open up a ticket, Nick, just to double check and make sure, we could do a remote support session and check the underlying OS to get more information about the hardware and the fan speeds, because yeah, if that's atypical and it was uh, coincides with an update, we'll want to know about that. I don't think we've seen that yet, but many shifting pieces between updates and obviously OS updates. So definitely something to keep an eye on. So I'd like to look further into that. So yeah, no, there's not a way to change fan speeds, but we definitely want to see if the hardware is acting differently um, with the new update. Also, depending on the type of hardware, which I'll cover later, where we're now on Asus hardware. We were previously on Supermicro, but there may be an element where it's putting in more work to support the newer OS and newer features, and therefore using having to cool, using up more fan, upping the fan speed. But if it's being more sporadic, then yeah, we'll want to look into that. Um, so yeah, so we added those things to the home page. In terms of up next, so we refreshed the home page. We added in the health dashboard again. Something else that we've done, and this was not something we were looking to do for this update, but again, I mentioned we were able to shoehorn a couple things in, some easy wins. So we redressed a lot of what we were pulling in from the vulnerability scanner into the other areas of NeQter, such as the host tab, the dashboard, the vulnerabilities dashboard, and the dashboard area. So a few enhancements that we made there. The events pulled from the vulnerability scanner now have all of the detail that you typically see in the vulnerability scanner reports. So before it was more of a summary, but now all of the different elements, impact um, and the different methods um, of how the vulnerability scan was detected. So all of those data points and fields are included, and I'll show you what that looks like. Um, The vulnerabilities tab itself also now provides the ability to show the detected vulnerabilities as a list. So that's a nice enhancement there. And as mentioned, we added the vulnerability chart to the home page, but we also enhanced the charts for the vulnerabilities and the network monitor pages in the host tool. And then one additional thing that we did is we fully embedded the vulnerability scanner as a flyout in the host tab. So what I mean by that is, um, previously when you're on the vulnerabilities tab and there's kind of an arrow to kick out to um, the vulnerability scanner, which previously navigated you to open up the vulnerability scanner tab. Now we have it right here as a flyout. So you don't need to leave the hosts area to drill down and see information that might be viewed differently or a little bit more granular in the vulnerability scan tab. So now it opens up here as a flyout. And much like the other flyouts, it's going to remember where you were. So once you close it and open it up again, you won't have to re-navigate. It's going to cache where what you were viewing in the vulnerability um, scanner. In terms of, we have the host view here, host vulnerabilities. We have the host listing here. But as was mentioned, now all the vulnerabilities are listed and can be searched with the search bar here, and of course you can achieve that same views and searching like you can on the vulnerability dashboard. So when you kick out this arrow here, and so this was the information we were talking about, a little bit more granular. So detection, of course, solution, insight. So all of those data points that you see on the vulnerability scanner reports listed out right here. And then additionally, so of course the vulnerability scanner is going to pull in all hosts that are on whatever band, whatever range of IPs that you put, whatever VLANs, whatever networks. So if there's an unknown host, it's going to be listed out in the unknown host area, of course, up at top. But it's also going to get listed out here, so you can add an unknown host into your inventory. Um, into your inventory here, much like you can on this tab, and reconcile and edit it and do all the things like you could before. You can also see, if we click the drop down, all of the vulnerabilities associated with with the host. And if we go to the vulnerabilities here where it's listed out and we see the vulnerability, we can also click on this nice kickout, which will open up this particular host's Insight flyout. So as you can see, we're starting to continually meld together the different areas of the tool. So we're really shaping up the host tab to be where you go in the platform, and then if you need to kick out for more granularity, you're going to be able to do so in the dashboard and the vulnerability scanner areas if you like. But it's going to be, and as you can see with this Insight flyout here, the vulnerabilities tab for the host flyout is much more data rich, where you can filter down the time frame or the severity of the vulnerabilities that you're looking at. And you can kick out the same details view, but now we have a summarized note kind of view for the vulnerability. So you can get the what report it was part of, and then the solution and the name of that particular vulnerability. So a lot of improvements, very very quickly for the vulnerability scanner in the host tab. Not something that we were looking to achieve, but it's one of those, one thing leads to another, and we're done. We added it. So those are some enhancements that we added in. Um, so I noticed there was a question from Brian. This is shiny. Um, And I mentioned, so the release date we were tentatively looking at for actually yesterday, but I believe we're looking for either later this week or early next week for the 2.15.5 update. Because we're wrapping up some testing surrounding it. So it will be within the next week or so that we have this drop. So vulnerabilities, what else did we have to cover here? So that's everything with the host tab. Obviously, there is an element where there is still the vulnerabilities dashboard where you can add more queries and manipulate the data, like with everything else with uh, the Kibana query language. But hopefully, with the new hosts element and pairing up the data, you'll be able to more quickly and evenly navigate and understand, okay, these vulnerabilities are affecting this host in my inventory, much like you can with some of the other data points in the host tab. So that's everything on the vulnerability scanner. Obviously, if you ask any questions about this, we can navigate back. But I'm going to keep going with some other things that we have added. So Veeam support. So we had mentioned this last month, and it is going to be in the 2.15.5 update. One snag, and well, I just need to confirm that this is a snag. I believe this might involve an agent update, just because when Veeam runs as a service, it writes its event logs to a separate area than native Windows event logs, obviously. So I think we might have to do an agent tweak for this in order to successfully pull these logs. I don't know if we were looking at that before. So we'll know more as this comes out. But we did add in Veeam support, which is reliant upon Windows event log themselves. There's additional event IDs that Veeam puts and it attributes to event logs to organize them. So this is actually going to be added under in terms of hosts, agents, and the different groups, adding in Veeam backup and replication as an event ID type, and actually we added a default as well. So what that will look like is we navigate back to the hosts area. We go to the agents tab where we change the configuration of the different agents for the different hosts. And so if we edit this group here, and we turn on Windows event logs and we choose these event IDs, we're going to see Veeam backup and replication as a list. So there's actually quite a number of different Veeam. Um, if we go over here, there's 213 different ones. So actually, when we turn on this Veeam monitoring default, there's going to be 122 added, and they'll get added to this list here. So I don't know why there's so many different designations or different logging types for Veeam, but that's the case. The vendor chose that. So you'll turn that on, and whichever group or whatever assets that you want to pull those Veeam logs, you're going to add that to them. And then the only other thing that you have to do is, of course, turn on the dashboard associated with Veeam. So then you can, visualize those logs. And you'll do that by going to settings, dashboards, and it'll be listed in the agents area here, Veeam jobs activity. You turn that on. An additional thing that we added into this update is one of the shoehorns. I'll wait here. Nick, do we have another question?
Yep, yeah, I was about to pause. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian was saying that their Veeam servers are not joined to the domain, and one is actually at an isolated remote site. Will there be any kind of complications from this kind of configuration for their Veeam?
So that I guess comes more into a Nectar agent deployment kind of discussion where obviously the most ideal route for Nectar agent uh, distribution is through an Active Directory group policy object. So if they're not joined to the domain, you will need to go and manually install those agents, or maybe you have an RMM or another, inventory application where you can install um, services or applications. So you'll just need to make sure the Nectar agent is on those assets, and then as long as it can communicate back to your Nectar server, there shouldn't be any complications. If one of them is on an isolated remote site and there's no ability to communicate back to, home to Nectar, then that we would need to look at that. There might be some complications there because there's no line of sight. But as long as you can install a Nectar agent on an asset and it can communicate back to the server, there shouldn't be any issue. It doesn't necessarily have to be domain joined because it's just reading the event logs of the local asset. So hopefully that answers that question. Um, Next up, so this is kind of a shoehorn element, Cisco Meraki Cloud Support. So this was actually an API that we had in the wings for a while. We didn't really have a good update to add it into, and we thought this one was good enough. So we thought we'd add this in. So for any of you that are currently leveraging, so obviously if you have this Cisco Meraki syslog, you can continue to pull those in. But this is more for log types and events that are from cloud. Specifically, it's the Cisco Meraki dashboard API. And just like G Suite, just like 365, it's going to be in the settings inputs area. And it's actually a very straightforward two-step process and we have the guide right here, basically going into your Cisco Meraki Cloud, the dashboard API access, and generating an API key from Cisco Meraki dashboard API, and then coming in here, punching it in, and turning it on. And then likewise with Veeam, you'll have to come in here and enable the Cisco Meraki API dashboard, where we'll be able to pull in network events, failed network connections, Wi-Fi data. There's a lot of different things on that Cisco Meraki API. So I don't currently actually have any logs in here, but we'll be able to get all of those different event types, product types, outcomes, users, and failed wireless connections, and a whole bunch of good information from Cisco Meraki API, and same deal with Veeam, where we'll be able to pull in basically just job status and activity outcomes, actions, categories. So you'll be able to know when jobs fail, when they succeed, different whatever data points. I mean, there's as I mentioned, 120 different event types. So hopefully there will be a nice picture from your Veeam backup utilities as they're running on your different systems. So those are some two integrations that we added, and of course I reviewed some other enhancements. Lastly, one of the enhancements that we've added under this new update to 15.5 is going to be our offline updater. So we understand this is going to only apply to a handful of clients, but we have gotten the question, so we wanted to deliver. So this involves if you do have an isolated Nectar, or you have a traditional setup with Nectar, but you have an isolated environment, and you've asked us, hey, I like Nectar, I really like it to be in this kind of enclave that we've set up. Can't connect to the internet. Is there a way to update? Well, this will allow for that. So we're adding in an offline updating feature. It's just going to essentially be you go into the updates area in settings, click on offline updating. It's going to prompt you to upload an update of a package. So those, of course, those will not be publicly available. We might do that in future, but as of right now, it's going to be manually distributed. We're going to have communication with you for a particular NeQter license. Hey, this is an enclave, or this requires offline update, and we'll have a list of members on that we can distribute those updates to, that you can download and then upload onto that NeQter. The updates are encrypted. This is going to be a moving forward situation. So if you have something on 214 or even 215.1 or 215.3, it's not going to work. It needs to be from this point forward. 215.5, we will support the offline updating. The only caveat to this is there's no vulnerability feed support at this time. We're going to look to add that later. So this is just for the underlying feature updates to NeQter. This isn't going to include any feed updates to the vulnerability scanner, so those will get out of date, over time. We will look to add those in as we move forward. But then also, of course, if there's demand for this feature, we have had requests. We've had probably under 10 requests for this. As that grows, we'll provide more support to it. So let us know. Reach out if you have an enclave or a specific use case that requires offline updating. We can support that moving forward from 215.5. So that's everything for the new update. As I mentioned, or we got a question about some things happening with the hardware. So we are on new hardware. We have had some of our obviously all new customers are going to be on this new hardware. There are a lot of customers, of course, still within this the band of a 3-year warranty support window, which all of the previous Supermicro hardware had. Some of our users are outside of that 3-year window, and obviously, it's the sun's going to come up tomorrow. The hardware's still going to run effectively, but as we approach, we have some users 4 years, 5 years on that Supermicro hardware. We're going to want to move to new Asus hardware. So the new hardware does have a standard 3-year warranty. It can actually flex up to a 5-year. So we have some of our customers who have elevated to that. So 5-year window of support. There's a lot of nice features with this new hardware. It's more powerful. It's more robust. So there's more threads per CPU. There's a dual power supply capability, hot swappable drives, expansion bays for we have had some customers get some custom configurations like maybe fiber hookups or things like that. So we are able to support that now. But basically, it's new era of hardware, much more capable, especially for what we're going to want to do and add as we feature up moving forward. So just kind of ringing the bell, letting you know this is available. If you like to transition to the new hardware, we are trying to pair it with renewals. Of course, so if you're coming up for renewal, and you have an older, 4 or 5 year hardware unit on Supermicro, we will of course look to move to Asus. If you have 3 years and under, obviously you're still good to go. We'll catch you on the next round. Kind of doing in terms of just got a question on what is the cost of the new Asus unit. So we still do have the different tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Those costs have remained pretty standard. We had to go up a bit on the tier 1, just in line with new hardware costs and expectations, and we actually do have RAID cards on these new Asus systems. So 3,000 for tier 1, 5,000 for a tier 2, and 7,500 for a tier 3. So those are what we're looking at for costs. We can obviously get anyone who wants. We can get a quote on that. So yeah, the hardware costs have remained pretty standard over the past few years or so, but the new capabilities keep increasing, and costs stay the same, which you love to see. So yeah, any specific questions on that, please reach out. We'd love to get you on this new hardware just because it's just so much more capable, and obviously we'd as we come out with new features, it's going to be more taxing on older systems. And then obviously, when you get into the 4 or 5 year, you do have to consider potential drive performance issues or drive failure, in which we have had a couple customers, not a lot, but a handful of clients in the 5 year plus band of hardware where they have one of the drives fail. Obviously, we have redundant RAID on all of the systems. So, but of course, the drives are the same age. One goes, you got to start worrying about the other one. Or if you're on a tier 3, you have 4 drives in a RAID 10. So,
Pat,
mhm.
David was also wondering if there's a migration path for us that would allow somebody to move from the physical hardware to a virtual machine.
Absolutely. So, whether you're moving from hardware to hardware or hardware to VM or VM to hardware, it's going to be the same kind of motion that you're looking for, where of course with the backup utility that we have, backing up configurations. Actually, one thing that I didn't actually see in the change log that I know we added that I didn't highlight here. One of the things before was we weren't backing up configurations of the vulnerability scanner and the different tasks and what have you. That is now going to be supported in 2.15.5. So with 2.15.5, you can back up all configurations and you'll be able to load them into a new system. So again, VM to hardware, hardware to hardware, hardware to VM. It's going to be the same. Um, it's going to be the same path. Steve, what we'll do, like it's your question as well. Please review the difference between T1, Tier 2, Tier 3. We'll send you over a spec sheet. Basically, it's just obviously different CPU, RAM, and disk resources. And essentially, across the different tiers, you see a doubling of each. So 32 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of RAM, and 120 gigs of RAM, for example, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. But won't hash that out fully on here. Basically, each one has different supported device counts and therefore different underlying resource requirements. Gets heavier and beefier and more robust the higher the tiers go. So we can send over a spec sheet for anyone that has questions about the differences between the different tiering system of the hardware. Um, and Yeah, so I think that's everything new. I know that's a lot. And hopefully, as you've seen, we've been able to increase the frequency of our updates. Obviously, 2.15.3 was a major undertaking. Um, but now, as we move forward, we're going to be adding in more integrations, different fixes. There are a lot of fixes or things that people asked about that we were able to add in that actually didn't cover today. One of the things was, for example, um, supporting local timestamping in emailed alerts in addition to UTC timestamping. That's all covered in the change log for the update, which is of course always important to review. But certain tweaks like that, little enhancements, or some people might consider them little, others it's a major improvement. So all of those types of things, there's about 10 or 15 of those types of things that I didn't even cover um, on this webinar. Um, but of course, a lot of improvements, a lot of things moving forward, and actually, we as of yesterday added another member to our team, another member on the development side, a junior developer. So we're going to be having more and more stuff come out. We're trying to meet demand from our customer base and everyone, of course, on the call today. So I know we have some time. We have about 20 minutes, and if we don't need to use up all of it, we don't have to. We'll give you your time back. But any other questions that would be worthwhile reviewing today? Anything else come in, Nick, that you saw that we might have missed?
I haven't seen any questions come in. The only thing that I can think of, just based off of some conversations I've been having over the last couple of weeks with a few of our clients, I've noticed there's been an uptick in the alert for failed logins being triggered from brute force on the vulnerability scanner.
Mm-hmm.
So it might not be a terrible idea if you wanted to review how to remove that NVT from a vulnerability scan.
Mm-hmm.
I know we have really good documentation on that, so we could always highlight where to find that information as well. But that's the only thing I've seen recently that I could see as being an additional value add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So we have had it's kind of it's kind of a balancing act between having uh, different scan profiles or different elements within the scan potentially interfering with some other areas of NeQter. So one of the things, and this is included in the base full and fast scan profile that we recommend is run monthly, is a brute force NVT family that includes basically a dictionary attack of generic passwords against different user accounts, and then therefore that's going to trigger or create a Windows event log surrounding a failed login, and then that will trigger, um, of course, a failed login attempt alert if all three of those things are turned on, which of course we recommend. So there is at the far end of it, you could potentially tune out traffic specifically from the NeQter IP on the um, on the failed login attempt, but what we recommend alert. But what we recommend is actually changing, the scan type to allow for just kind of removing that MVT family so you don't cause that havoc within your environment. So how you can go about that is going to the vulnerability scanner, going to configuration, and going down to scan configs. And if we do have this documented, but if anyone needs any help, of course, support is available. Open up a ticket and we will facilitate this for you. But if we go down to full and fast, so we can go over here and we can either, if you want to keep it as is and then make a new one, you can clone it, hit the little sheep icon, and then you can edit full and fast. So I'll rename this full and fast, without brute force. And basically, you're going to go, it's right up at the top, brute force attacks. You can specify and say, you know what, I want some of them, but not all of them. You can, of course, do that. So the one that is, of course, causing the trigger is SMB brute force logins with default credentials. So you can just turn off that one. If you want to turn that one off specifically, but then, track everything, SSH, maybe switches or networking equipment or things like that, you can keep those on. Or we can go over here and we can just turn them all off. So uncheck this box, hit save, and now when we go and run a scan or edit a task, So if we want to go over here and edit this task and change it from full and very deep ultimate to full and fast, now we have it here without brute force. We hit save. Now we will no longer have those brute force NVTs, and therefore we will no longer have that influx of failed login attempts, which are, of course, happening, and the alert is doing its job, but those are, artificially being generated by NeQter. So if you don't want that in your report, um, then that is the method in which to kind of remediate that problem. Um, so I went over it very quickly here, but we do have it documented, and if you have specific questions, please feel free to reach out to Nick, or of course reaching out to support. There is an element where we did have a couple clients create a broadcast storm of sorts where they were generating or running those scans either daily or more frequently, sometimes twice a day, and then it was creating a broadcast storm of logging traffic into their system and actually causing a log stash or logging failure because it was overburning their NeQter system. Now this was a very, very large environment, so that's not going to happen on smaller systems or smaller networks, but it's kind of two ends working against the middle in not in a great way. So just wanted to kind of cover that. We have had that question a bit. The good news is NeQter's doing its job. It's reporting, hey, there's failed login attempt, and the network in the vulnerability scanner is performing, brute force dictionary attacks to look for potential vulnerable systems. But unfortunately, both of those, it's burning the candle at both ends, and wasn't coming out with a great outcome. So that is how you can alleviate that kind of unintended consequence of sorts. I just wanted to review that quickly. Um, so yeah, so Nick, anything else like that you think would be good to cover today?
No, that's really been the only common across the board thing I've seen amongst our clients recently. Outside of that, honestly, everyone's been very successful with the use of the platform, and no one's been having any issues or really any functionality questions who I've spoken to as of late.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, so I think we'll look to wrap up today. So I realized because I had to basically re-enroll and recreate the webinar series. So I'm glad it worked. I'm glad everyone's here. But I noticed that it scheduled it for the first Tuesday of next month, which is of course 4th of July. And while it's very patriotic to you know be meeting NIST and CMMC in the defense industrial base, no one wants to listen to me talk on a national holiday celebrating our independence. So we're going to kick that to Tuesday the 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern, and then when we return on in August, we'll have it on the first Tuesday, which actually is the first. So I will look to change that. So you should be getting emails for changes. So we'll be looking to meet again July 11th. So want to thank everyone for their time today. Thanks, Nick, for helping to moderate. And of course, any questions, reach out to Nick, reach out to our support team, submit a ticket through the regular channels. And then, of course, this was recorded today and will get put up on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't subscribed to that already, please do. And we'll look to wrap up today. Everyone have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, great 4th of July, and we'll reconvene second week of July.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your afternoon.